3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, and here with me is the great Dork Lords, Matt.
Hey everyone, welcome.
And this has been quite the day, and let's get started. So last time we ended up seeing in chapter 2 of Lord of the Rings, Samwise got caught by Gandalf eavesdropping, although he claimed there was no eaves to be dropped upon, I think it was. And you basically had Frodo, who had inherited the ring as well as Bag End.
My cat, Mr. Pickles, is attempting to eat my the cord to my headphones. There you go. Well done, Mr. Pickles. All right, there we go.
And we have Homebody. Hey, hello,
right.
Homebody.
Hey. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I was anyway. Yeah, I was being tugged by a cat. Like, oh.
Now, Gandalf is still there, present with Frodo in chapter 3. 3 is company, which itself is a part of the chapters that are rather meandering. There's a few of these before the adventure really gets started. Arguably, while I know there's a big fuss about how Tom Bombadil should have been in the movie, but arguably the chapters are meandering until around the Barrow Downs to the Prancing Pony. And this is not a criticism lobbing. No, this is setting the tone and the pacing of the book, as Tolkien was kind of following in the example of Mark Twain in more than one way. As Twain would take some time in his, for example, Jeanne d'Arc book to get started. And the Jeanne d'Arc book served as a great deal of inspiration for Tolkien's own work in Lord of the Rings, such as with Pippin and Merry, who are semi-inspired, I think, by Paladin and by Noel, who are both 2 major protagonists from Mark Twain's novel. Although in Mark Twain's novel, one of them is killed off, and that would probably be the inspiration to an extent, I think maybe for Pippin. But the truth of the matter is Tolkien takes things in a very different direction. But as I said, I noticed in this chapter, he is meandering. And it is important that he meander because the other backstory to these chapters is that we have to bear in mind this is still in the Hobbit, in the realm of the Hobbit. And the thing about that is that Tolkien is, at this time, we got to bear in mind Trotter was something on the horizon, for example. Tolkien wasn't sure which way he was going to take his book, whether he was going to take it in the direction of the epic romance, I should say, story that might have been once told to Aliénor d'Aquitaine, like in the model of those stories, or if he was going to simply make it Hobbit 2. In the end, he chose to write out romance, epic, which, thank heavens, he took that approach.
Yeah, I think, his the story from the beginning of the book to Moria changed several times. Once he hits Moria, then the storyline starts to really become concrete, much more so, toward the rest of the trilogy. But this section, definitely was switching, changing character names, motivations, a lot of stuff, and we'll see some of that stuff. A little bit of it in this chapter, but more so in some of the chapters to come, where it's like, oh, okay, that's a leftover from an earlier version of this story.
Yeah, yeah. And we have Homebody who says, I skimmed through the Bombadil stuff. I understand. I really liked it on my most recent read through. I really did enjoy it.
But it's true that Bombadil, his place in the story is very concrete. He's in that chapter. He's in the little Barrow Downs, and then we really don't hear from him much again, except they reference him a couple of times. Council Elrond, that kind of stuff. Same here. We get what turns out to be an actually very important character in a lot of ways, Gildor, but doesn't get it gets name dropped a few times later. But basically, so it is that you're right. There's a little feeling out of the world a little bit that we're getting in these chapters.
And in this chapter, you have Gandalf, who presses for Frodo to leave quietly, at which point Frodo objects to the idea of leaving too suddenly. And of course, hello, Mark. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your surname.
Mark! Good to see you, sir.
I obviously can't probably pronounce it, but being too French and all. But the thing is, it's interesting that Frodo hesitates and hees and haws about leaving throughout this chapter. And this is really something that is actually, I don't like using the term realistic in a mythological story, as it's not quite the right term to use. But it is certainly realistic that, you're going to leave everything that and so you're head into possible certain doom. So that is a factor to consider for poor Frodo. But you have Gandalf, who interestingly tells him on, page 66 of the edition I have, which is the Red Book edition, but you cannot see very far. Neither can I. It may be your task to find the cracks of doom, but that quest may be for others. I do not know. At any rate, you are not ready for that long road yet. Now, what I find interesting there is that Gandalf hasn't yet decided if it's Frodo's duty or not to find the cracks of doom and toss the ring down. And I have seen it said on a few channels and in a few places that Gandalf had already determined that it had to be Frodo. Maybe he had some inkling that Frodo might have this destiny about him, but he does say here that it may be your task to find the crack of doom, but that quest may be for others. I do not know.
I think maybe what he's suggesting there is
he doesn't know.
He doesn't know, but he's also like, let's get to Rivendell. I think that was always his idea. It's like, if I can get you to Rivendell, Elrond will have a plan and we can talk about it. And maybe, we give the ring to Glorfindel and let him take off, whatever the thing is. We're not sure yet, but let's get you to Rivendell first, and then we can kind of figure out from some of the wiser people on the planet what to do with this thing. Yeah,
and I do agree on that one. I also think it's interesting that Frodo would prefer to leave to wait till his 50th birthday.
Right. Yeah, Mark, we're talking about, you're right. I do think you're right. He's not ready to go. There's a few lines in there that suggest he has this reticence, as you would, right? He's like, and then he gets extra rationale not to go because Gandalf disappears and he's supposed to come back by his birthday and he's not there. And, you can imagine in that scenario being, well, maybe I'll just wait. Maybe I'll wait for the guy who's going to, be important for all this to show up.
Yeah. And it's also, it also must be born in our minds that, as Homebody says, or maybe he wanted to spare Frodo for a bit. There is that. Gandalf, as grumpy as he can be at a few points in the story, and he can get pretty grumpy, as Girl Next Gondor is prone to commenting. The thing about Frodo is that Gandalf is that he does want to spare the Hobbit's pain.
So he's trying to ease him into it. You're saying, like, hey,
Yeah.
maybe you don't have to take it all the way to Mount Doom. Well, he has to take it all the way to Mount Doom.
Yeah, it's just we got to remember that pity is something that Gandalf is always
certainly huge,
and so
huge, important emotion.
Yeah, and naturally he would feel for others in that regard, and would hold true to that value. Now, what's also interesting, real quick, on
remind me who your dog's name. I'm sorry, I just saw him walking. I saw the door open, and I'm forgetting what's the doggy's name.
Jet.
Jet.
His name is Jet. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he saved my life recently, so.
That's right. Oh man.
Yeah.
So definitely earned some time here.
Yeah. Where
Great
was
point, Mark.
Oh, let me find Mark's comment.
He's just talking. He's referencing Gildor, talking about
has to be brought
Gandalf's
gently,
temper.
as old lady Grantham said. Well, that's fair. Oh, whoops, wrong one. As Gildor will say later, of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger. Oh, very good point. Yeah. That describes both. Actually, that describes both Gandalf and Saruman perfectly. And let me think. Weirdly, I also think it describes wizards in other works that were especially published around the time of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
They usually don't suffer fools well, right? They're usually like, you're wasting my time. Now, Radagast kind of comes off as not that type, but yeah.
Radagast is the only patient one, it seems.
Yeah.
And unsubtle. Cute doggy. Yes, thank you.
Jet, I love to see the door opened. It was like, Breep, and the dog walks in. It's great.
Yeah, he tends to open doors as he pleases and doesn't like it when they're closed.
So interestingly, we get this bit there where Gandalf stays in the Shire. He has his conversation with Frodo, and he stays in the Shire for a long while until the summer. So until the end of June, at which point he leaves. But he says he's got something he's heard news that makes him anxious. And what we know eventually of that news is he's hearing about a war in Gondor. He's hearing about fighting in the Gondor region, and he leaves, and eventually that's going to lead to him also getting captured by Saruman. Hence, he doesn't return.
Now, I also wanted to just highlight one thing, since I recently did a history of fantasy series of, well,
I hear you, Homebody, by the way.
We'll
talk about your comment there, Homebody, in a second. But yeah, we'll have a Gildor section.
Yeah, well, we have to, given the chapter. And what I was going to comment on was just Elrond half-elven. This is the first time the half-elven term would ever be used in fantasy like this. And it would not be the last time. And yet I find no half-elf would ever stand quite so tall as Elrond. And I say that in spite of loving almost every half-elf I've seen in fiction. But I just wanted to bring attention to that.
Okay.
As well, Tolkien deserves to get a lot of attention for everything he did right in all of the examples he set to other writers.
Inspiration for countless folks.
Yeah. That said, apparently, in the meantime, with Merry's help, Frodo ended up buying up land, or at least a little house in Crick Hollow, in the country beyond Buckleberry. And that's where he starts pretending that he's going to be moving there, or at least that he's finding himself a place as a secondary location to stay at when he wants to at first, and then it'll become the main home when he's ready to move out. Or so that's what sort of thing he's pretending.
Right, especially because Crick Hollow's to the east, and if he decides he's going to be maybe heading to Rivendell, it's the way he wants to end up going. So it makes sense that way. And he sells the house, Bag End, to Lobelia, Sackville Baggins. That's
that was... Actually, I want to ask Dan, what did he think of that?
Oh, boy.
What did you think of Lobelia getting Bag End?
that was
You don't like it?
interesting,
I rather like it.
and it's like
I like the fact that she was waiting till midnight. She was like, "Oh, the key!" And yeah, it's so desperate to get a hold. I don't want to waste 1 minute of my time owning Bag End. Like, okay,
Yep. And you've got Otho, who died at 102 years old. What are you crying about, Jet? Yeah, he died before he could even get in, while Lobelia gets to
certainly aged up.
Yep. And Lobelia got to enjoy the place and pretty much say at long last, it's sorry, puppy's just
Like her dream has come true.
it's like
being a sucky baby.
deep down, I'm thinking at the end of The Hobbit, the Sackville Baggins took advantage of his absence and raided Bilbo's house.
Sure
This
did.
time, it's going to be on Frodo's terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he gets a chance to remove
Frodo,
the things he
of
wants to
course,
remove.
Makes it clear he's fretting about never seeing this place again because, like he says on page 71 of the Red Book edition, "I wonder if I shall ever look down into that valley again," he said quietly.
Yeah.
Now, we later find out in the next chapter that Frodo's been making a lot of comments like that and has generally been drawing attention to how he's departing that soon, and that this is where he probably should have been a bit more subtle about things. And
at least I think that was a pretty good ruse in that, hey, you know what? I'm downsizing. I'm moving to Crick Hollow. It sounds reasonable. Like it's a reasonable potential scenario that he might be engaging. So I give him a little credit on the subterfuge there. But you're right. You could have talked about it a little less.
Yeah. And now what's interesting is that with the downsizing thing is that would suggest that he's lost a portion of the fortune or something that the Baggins are so famous for.
Right.
And
which is also one of the reasons I think Lobelia wants the place, because she thinks that somehow hidden inside there's, if I click on the bookshelf, it'll spin out and there'll be a giant gold hoard in it or something.
Yeah, and the trouble is that she's just, well, she's a few decades too late. There's no...
Well, what's interesting? I mean, I think we should mention here the front stoop of Bag End is arguably one of the most influential places in Middle-earth in terms of like the history of Middle-earth, especially the Third Age. Things that have happened. I mean, you've got obviously a bunch of, Bilbo and Frodo being there. Throw in Sam, Merry, Pippin. Fredegar, the fifth Beatle. Company of dwarves that includes Thorin, Balin, Glowin, Gimli's dad. Gandalf spends an inordinate amount of time there. The Ring resides there for several years. Saruman is ultimately stabbed by Wormtongue there. Wormtongue is then immediately cut down with arrows there. Like, there's a lot of Middle-earth history happens at this building. So Bag End is its own character in a way.
Yeah. Well, there's so much of the Third Age that revolves around this very iconic location. So, yeah.
Considering it's just like, it's just a little house tucked away.
And what's great is that it's not just Gandalf and his happenings that kind of occur on that step, but it's near there that we also get our first intro to an extent of the Nazgul, as one of them speaks to the Gaffer.
God, he's
down
so
the road
close.
from there.
Just the fact that Frodo can overhear this conversation standing in his yard, it suggests that the Black Rider is, 20 yards away, and Frodo's not trying to hide. Like, he's this close to just finishing the trilogy. like, oh my god. Anyway, but yeah, heart racing stuff.
Yeah, and that was a scene that a little nerve wracking and a little important as well, as we get our first brush with danger, that the Shire is not some place that's like a gated community away out of Middle Earth. It's just about all the danger and darkness can just waltz on in and have a party, so to speak.
Right. Good point. It's only protected in that people just overlook it until people don't overlook it. Yeah.
There's an old saying I think I've heard recently, and I've reheard, and it's that what is it? The city is only safe when the Roman legions are out in the field. But the minute you lose your Roman legions, there is no safety to be had for a civilization or for a city. And that's where I know what some would think about that. I'm not making any comments about like American military interventionism or anything. No. I just mean for the Shire, they don't realize it, but they do have a Roman legion. It's called the
Dunedain, right?
Yeah, the Dunedain are the ones acting as the Roman legions in a way, protecting the Shire, as is Gandalf. But the thing is, arguably, the Dunedain are weakening to an extent, or not able to project the kind of strength that is needed to keep the ring wraiths and those like Saruman from beginning to intervene and poke their noses in there. So this is actually a major moment, though it seems kind of minor. I don't know what you think of that thought.
Yeah. Danger enters the Shire. This is the Shire has always been this little enclave where our heroes set out from. Oh, I'm in the safety of my home, and I'm going to set out into the world, and danger will face me there, and then I'll return, and it's safe again. And here you have a situation where, it is no longer safe to be in the safe home. In fact, literally right next door, if the Black Rider had done a little better checking of the mailboxes, he might have come up and come to Bag End, and you'd be in real trouble. So it's ever present now.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Tolkien himself was trying to make a commentary upon. Just that danger, you can't hide away from the danger of the world forever. And, that's a very apt observation. And being a World War I veteran, he would have understood this sort of thing because he grew up in a fairly safe society and then was thrust into the horrors of World War I. So that he kind of
World War
experienced
II.
a bit of Frodo's journey. And Christopher was thrust into World War II, so he got to experience that too. And really, it's not hard to. It's not a very difficult thing to feel bad for the Tolkiens, given what they went through in the early 20th century. Now,
I will also add that it does seem like the hobbits do take their quiet, safe lives for granted.
They do.
And they need to realize that they can't just approach the problems of the outside with their heads in the dirt, taking the ostrich approach to deal with their problems.
Yeah. Like sometimes a nation needs to be in history isolationist. Like you look at the 19th century with the US or ancient China up to the Tang period, they were isolationist for a reason because, they didn't really want to enter into conflict with the external world. Rome entered a phase like that.
I like your Trek analogy, homebody, with the Dominion and the Breen. Yeah.
That's a good example as well.
A little crossover here. Yeah.
But other times you can't hide away from the world. And now it's mentioned by Sam around, I won't even bother with the page number, but that his pack is light. And this is just to talk about a character moment real quick. This is the kind of behavior Sam's going to exhibit throughout the entire story, just lying and saying, well, my pack's fairly light, even though, he's probably weighed down, and he's trying to be a real pal or brother of sorts to Frodo, and trying to take up Frodo's burden as much as possible onto himself. And much as weirdly, I'll actually say that on my last trip to the US, which was months and months ago, I actually had a friend who was a lot like Samwise in how he treated me. And,
sounds like a good friend.
Oh yeah, very good friend. So that he was constantly keen to take up the burden as much as possible onto himself rather than me, even though I was quite eager to and whatnot. So there are men like this who are running around in the world. And am I breaking up?
Yeah, video wise, I can hear you fine, but your video's a little blurry at times. But
Maybe
your audio's still good.
For a moment. Okay, I want to make sure the audio is good.
It's interesting, actually. There's a bit of a mantra in the improv world that maybe is a little Sam-like, in that the idea is the best improvisers aren't really the people that, oh, I know the snappy joke and I'll just be up front and center and dominate the scenes. The best ones are the ones that make their fellow actors look good. You provide the material by which someone else can excel on stage. If you have people doing that work, you're like, that's the real person that's really leading this scene. And so it's basically the Samwise principle. Make your partner look good.
Kind of like Bud Abbott from the 1940s. He was the best straight man in history. He made Lou Costello look so much funnier.
That's right. Thank you for Homebody saying that the audio is good.
Okay, thank you, Homebody. I really appreciate that. But yeah, Sam is someone who actually, I've also met friends in Japan who are a lot like Samwise. Samwises are very common in Japan. I'm still in contact with a few people who are like Samwise out there, and it's such a blessing to have friends like that. So Frodo is certainly lucky to have Sam, and he's certainly aware of it. That said, they cross the Brandywine Road and they soon find themselves in Tookland and head for the Green Hill country, with Frodo missing his hole, as said, his hobbit hole. And we get a leftover of the fairy story, almost of the more fairy tale Brothers Grimm type thing, or Pedo, when you have a fox that happens upon them and thinks to himself, hobbits, but what next? I have heard of strange doings in this land, but I have seldom heard of a hobbit sleeping out of doors under a tree. 3 of them. There's something mighty queer about behind this. This feels like it would be more appropriately put in The Hobbit than
in the. It is a Hobbit feeling thing. You've got a fox thinking in in verbiage, noting that they're hobbits, thinking about the times he's living in. Yeah. Some of us Americans like hockey. The Wings. I'm a soccer guy myself, but okay,
I'm not a hockey
you probably
guy.
are talking to the right audience with our Canadian friends here. I don't know if you guys are hockey guys, but
no, not really. The only hockey team I like is Montreal Canadiens, because that was our dad's team. Hockey teams.
There you go. Then that works.
Hockey teams in Canada are passed from father to son.
Okay.
I'm entirely curious. There's all sorts of traditions about that.
I have family members who are way into hockey, but I myself am more of a soccer guy, as it turns out. But, hey, teach their own. Get a passion and go with it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like this is a holdover from The Hobbit, kind of, or Hobbit 2, I guess we could call those ideas. I don't
Well,
know.
it fits into what you were just saying about how these early chapters do have a bit of a Hobbit feel to them. This would be certainly something you could point to and say, yeah, because we're not going to see a lot of this type of observational, animals making such observations later in the books. This is kind of this moment when we have Mr. Fox, Toad, Wind in the Willows.
And this takes now. We next get the Road Goes Ever On poem, which I think is, well, we might as well read all the poems as we go through. The road goes ever on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with weary feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet. And whither then? I cannot say. Now, this is a poem that seems to come to Frodo, and he's not sure where it came from. And it is a poem that does do a good job describing Frodo's journey as his road joins that of many others.
Oh, it's a very evocative poem for sure, and Peter Jackson does a good job with it. We have Gandalf is chanting this poem when we first meet him. In fact, I believe when he comes into the Shire. It's it. And then, the next poem too, which is the walking poem, is very similar to this one in that thematically, the idea of going on this journey. It's kind of this hero's journey moment. I find a lot of meaning in those poems. What's that?
Your turn to read it.
Oh, okay. Hang on. I gotta pull up the poem. I'll say this while I'm pulling up the poem. There's actually the walking poem. There's a callback to it in Return of the King. Frodo is going to, which we'll eventually get to. Frodo recites the lines, but there's a notable difference in the wording. So he has changed the words of this particular poem, and the change he makes. I wrote down the change he makes, so I guess we'll do that anyway. In this chapter, the lines go, "And though we pass them by today, tomorrow we may come this way and take the hidden paths that run towards the moon or to the sun." And in Return of the King, the lines read, "And though I oft have passed them by, a day will come at last when I shall take the hidden paths that run west of the moon, east of the sun." So west of the moon, east of the sun, which is new verbiage that he's added. He's changed this poem up. It suggests you're passing out of this world. Right, you're going you're past the sun, past the moon, and so Frodo's rewritten this poem to acknowledge that he's passing to the west. He's kind of written his own story into this poem, which I think is it's Tolkien being awesome. He's referencing something that's hundreds of pages earlier and making this really interesting change to it that reflects the way the story's going. But, where am
Upon
I?
the Hearth.
Okay, all right, we're going to do Upon the Hearth. This is a longer poem, but okay.
I'll get Snow
Upon
White
the hearth, the fire is red. Beneath the roof, there is a bed. But not yet weary are our feet. Still round the corner we may meet a sudden tree or standing stone that none have seen but we alone. Tree and flower and leaf and grass, let them pass, let them pass. Hill and water under sky, pass them by, pass them by. Still round the corner there may wait a new road or a secret gate. Though we pass them by today, tomorrow we may come this way and take the hidden paths that run towards the moon or to the sun. apple, thorn, and nut and slow. Let them go, let them go. Sand and stone and pool and dell. Fare you well, fare you well. Home is behind, the world ahead. There are many paths to tread, through shadows to the edge of night, until the stars are all alight. Then world behind and home ahead, we'll wander back to home and bed. Mist and twilight, cloud and shade, away shall fade, away shall fade. Fire and lamp and meat and bread, and then to bed, and then to bed. Which, of course, that last paragraph, parts of those lines were used in Return of the King, the film. It's where Pippin sings to Denethor, and he's singing those lines about home is behind, the world ahead. Really beautiful song, actually. Oh, well, thank you, homebody. Appreciate that. But yeah, anyway, there you go.
But yeah, this is also singing, I think, this could be also something used to describe all of their journeys. The world is ahead and home is behind them. And they're now well on the road on that hero's journey that's going to take them into quite a few dark places. And of course, you get a Snow White song, which I meant to find me my French edition of Les Seigneurs des Anneaux, but I don't know where I quite put it. And I'll have to find it for next time so that I could read the French variant or something, because Snow White is quite popular in French, and she's known as Blanche Neige. So fairy stories are very popular, at least in most places. Most French people I've talked to. But anyways, the song that Frodo hears, which is sung by the elves, those of Gildor's group.
Very fortuitously, as it their song scares away a black rider, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the Nazgul was quite prepared to clash with them quite yet. And
Frodo was about to put the ring on as well. He was being tempted yet again to put the ring on, and might have done so if the elves hadn't come and interrupted that moment.
Yep.
Gildor, I like it.
Snow White, O lady clear, O queen beyond the western seas, O light to us that wander here, amid the world of woven trees. Gilthoniel, O Elbreth, clear are thy eyes and bright thy breath. Snow White, we sing to thee in a far land beyond the sea. O stars that in the sunless year, with shining hand by her were sown, in windy fields now bright and clear, we see your silver blossom blown. O Elbreth, Gilthoniel, we still remember, we who dwell in this far land beneath the trees, thy starlight on the western seas. I really like this song. This might be my favorite of those in this chapter.
There's a certain beauty to it.
Yeah, and it figures it would be about singing to Elbreth, the Queen of the Stars, I believe. And she...
A lot of relevance to this, but yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, she... Now, there's... where is it? Let's see. I like the line, we still remember we who dwell. And we still remember is something that many... that is very popular in a lot of cultures. But now, I don't know if it'd be nous or je in French, but or on. The only reason I want to take a look at it in French was just because je me souviens or on se souvient are slogans for Quebec. We still remember.
Oh, I see. Oh, sure.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's usually in reference to. I'm not trying to be political. It's usually in reference to when they were independent from English-speaking Canada. Like the national slogan for Quebec is basically "Je me souviens." I still remember. Like we still.
Well, in
remember
this case, you're talking, as Homebody has noted. we're talking
Varda.
Varda,
Yeah.
and we're also talking the West. And so Amon, in this case, Gildor,
Who is
we have
from the
pretty
West.
good evidence to say that he saw the
Valinor.
West, and he was
Yeah,
remembering seeing the West from his
what
time.
I was going to get at was there's also culturally in Quebec the reference to we still remember the old country.
Perfect.
When I went there,
Exactly.
they made that reference clear to me, and that I think I think the elves could say the same thing, so that there's very much a strong cultural. We still remember the old country, often Valinor, and this is something that sets the elves of Elrond's Hall over in Rivendell and some of those over with Galadriel apart from the other elves or other people, free people of Middle Earth. They remember Valinor. They remember Beleriand. And
Glorfindel would be another one. There's not a whole lot of elves at this time in Middle Earth who did live once upon a time in the West. I mean, there are some, but
no.
Gildor's in very elite company. The Noldor, and yeah, you're right. Galadriel, Glorfindel, those kind of folks. But yeah, what's great too about this song is it's being sung partially because Varda, Elbereth, is kind of the patron Vala of the elves, but also because of where they're coming from. And yeah, Homebody mentioned the Palantir party. So Gildor has led a pilgrimage to the White Tower, to Elostirion, the Elostirion stone. It's the one Palantir that isn't connected to the others. It only gazes west and gives a view of the shores of Aman. It's kind of up for debate as to what it's actually showing. I feel like perhaps it connects to the giant master stone on what is that Avalone, but the pilgrimage is so that they can maybe get a glimpse of Elbereth. That I get the sense that perhaps on certain times of the year she'll come to the shore and acknowledge them, and they can actually make a pilgrimage, see their patron, and it's a kind of a worship moment. And then then they're so in this case they're heading back from it. They're heading east, not west. They're heading back from the shore, probably towards Rivendell, something like that. So hence they'd be singing the song, even having more reason to sing the song, because that's the whole point in their pilgrimage here, is to see Elbereth. And the line, "O Elbereth Gilthoniel," that's a line that Frodo knows, he learns, but I think the song kind of puts that back in his mind a bit, and he's going to use that phrase a little bit later, which frightens off the Witch King. So it's her name has power. Her name puts fear into the enemy, and so it's relevant in a lot of ways that way.
Yeah, I'm just looking one thing up I forgot to do.
While you do that, then I'll carry on with the other parts of that are interesting.
I was going to.
She is the Queen of Stars, Lady of the Stars, and we get a starry night. So they're actually walking amongst the stars, and we get very descriptive stuff. Tolkien mentions, what does he mention? He mentions the Pleiades, or he doesn't call them that. He calls them the netted stars. And he mentions the swordsman in the sky, Orion.
Yeah, and what I like is that Tolkien designs his own constellations in that regard, which suggests that the Valar set up their own, like that Varda, maybe
the
she
Valasirka, for instance.
She designed the constellations. I kind of imagine her almost as an artist painting the constellations, and you get the connecting stars and whatnot for that. I don't know. That's just something that.
Yeah. And then you get the Valasirka, the sickle of the Valar, is the Big Dipper. Yep. And it's 7 stars that were set into the sky as a challenge to Morgoth. And so obviously those 7 stars become very important in Middle Earth lore.
Mm.
You know, 7 stars and 7 stones and 1 white tree. You've got Numenor and Gondor, all that stuff. That's all relating back to Elbereth.
And now we have another mystery. Gildor Inglorian is Gildor's full name.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Son of Inglor. And he is of the house of Finrod. And I will not lie. I don't think Finrod really had any kids.
He did not. Finrod did not have any children. It's very specifically. But Tolkien changed his mind over the years on that. In canon, Finrod had no kids. So, if you take this at face value, when Gildor, when you say House of Finrod, I think the way you would make this make sense is that he comes from that house. So he was in the court of Finrod, maybe at Nargothrond. That's right, Finrod Felagund.
Best of the elves.
He definitely has a case to be best of the elves.
After Fingal.
No, I get you. I'm just saying, in terms of his self-sacrifice, there's a lot about him that's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, and so his father's Finarfin, which is also Galadriel's father. So I think we could just say that perhaps at one time, maybe the idea was that he was going to be either a son or a grandson of Finrod in some way. Obviously, that's not the case in canon. I feel like he just came from that house, and house is not lineage. House means he was in the court of Finrod.
Yep. I think with that, though.
Oh, great point, Mark. He uses the Elbereth and Amansul. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We were just mentioned that with the Witch King. Yep.
I kind of had. Now I'm just gonna wax a little theoretical here.
It was Amansul, I'm pretty sure. Sorry, just answering our Mark.
I would argue here that it is possible. Like, I'd argue it would be more likely that it's possible with a cousin or something, or maybe a different Finrod, as there aren't too many elves that are named.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, like when it comes to Gildor, it doesn't necessarily have to be King Finrod. It could be some other person who held the name. But on
could be. Although you have a Noldor elf, he's mentioning Finrod particularly. Finrod was here in the First Age. He would have been alive at that time. It kind of makes sense that he would have somehow been connected. But I hear your point.
Probably through a cousin or something.
But
then there's real quick. There's also, as for Glorfindel, I always got the impression he was maybe related through the female line to Turgon. Like, you know what I mean? Via either Turgon's wife or through Turgon's mother, like as a cousin or something, and also shared Vanyar blood. That was the impression I had with Glorfindel. Maybe I'm off, but that was kind of how I kind of looked at him.
Yeah. I see that.
House, it means family or also retainer and whatnot. Yeah. So basically, no matter what, Gildor is within the house, very likely more a retainer of the house.
Yeah, and obviously that's a huge honor. This guy's been around for a long time. If he was hanging around in the House of Finrod, he was, and of course we know he came from the West, so he was around before the First Age, went through the First Age, survived the First Age, but the entire Second Age. He's practically gotten to the end of the Third Age at this point. So this guy's been around for just ever, many millennia. And so, he's seen some stuff.
Perhaps it's also a possibility of a formal adoption. For example, you have some nobles or royals. They didn't have a male heir, so they'd adopt from...
Finrod did not do that. But in this case, the best theory would be probably what Mark came up with.
I see your point, though. Yeah. I mean, the idea that, hey, I didn't have an official heir. Maybe I want to leave what I have to somebody. You Gildor are somebody that I find worthy enough to carry on.
Yeah, the most likely thing is the retainer idea, although the trouble is this of the House of Finrod thing, which isn't used terribly often, and Tolkien really isn't clear. But I do like the retainer idea, as this harkens not only to Japanese history where you were of the house if you're a retainer, but also to, well, Western history, primarily of those countries which adopted chivalry and whatnot. What's this?
Well,
Augustus. Yeah. Well, Augustus. Yeah, that was the Romans. They were their own case. Although I am fond of the Romans.
while we're mentioning the stars real fast, I'll just throw out the fact that obviously we're going to get a lot of star motifs. So the constellations show up in the text quite a bit, and you'll see various versions of the constellation show up. But obviously, you're also going to see a lot of the Venus, the evening star, shows up quite a bit, and obviously that is Elrond's father, Yarendil, flying his ship with a Silmaril. And again, that also relates back to Elbereth as well. But those Tolkien keeps, he finds strategic ways to put those in there. It's almost like this way of saying, look at this wider world. Here are these suggestions of these powerful spirits that affected the world that folks are living on.
Yeah, the Romans may have done it a lot, homebody.
Right,
although Mark raises a good point that Finrod knew nothing of his would last.
Right, he prophesized, like, I will have no children and my kingdom will not last. And then he went off and perished.
Yeah, although although that said, his legacy would live on through Gil-galad and Elrond to an extent.
Well, through his sister, right? Through Galadriel as well.
Yeah, through Galadriel as well. And this whole notion is that the elves' legacy, in a way, is the second-born, or one could argue the third-born, considering the dwarves. That is to say, men, the race of men. So,
yes, he was one of the first to make that that connection. Yeah.
But that said, I just realized there is one argument to an extent for maybe not adoption, but removal from succession, and that would be the Feanorians, which they're basically taken off the line of inheritance, so that this is also something that one does have to be calculated as well as in with the argument of adoption versus blood inheritance, as blood doesn't always mean you, like the direct line of succession doesn't always mean you inherit, as the Feanorians by right of inheritance and by blood should have inherited, but they didn't because
they would pass to the line of Fingolfin. Yeah.
And then Fingolfin's line is basically in the
wacky Feanorians. Exactly, homebody. Very wacky. I guess we're talking about elves at this time that had been in the West. I guess you got to throw in potentially Maglor might be out there somewhere. One of the last surviving Feanorian. So maybe. But so we get these our heroes narrowly dodge. I don't know if it's the same Black Rider twice or if it's two Black Riders, but two encounters with a Black Rider. And then they meet up with Gildor and they end up having this conversation with him. And this my favorite part of this chapter is the conversation with Gildor.
Oh, yeah.
It's there's a lot to it that's kind of fun. We find out later in subsequent chapters that Gildor is actually incredibly helpful to Frodo in the days to come, because he alerts Tom Bombadil, Aragorn, and Elrond of Frodo's journey. And so all three of those individuals save Frodo's life. And, obviously, if not for Gildor, there is no Fellowship of the Ring, because Frodo never gets to Rivendell. So there's that. But in this moment, it does struck me as odd when I first read this chapter that Gildor abandons Frodo in his sleep. It's like, get on to sleep, and then when you wake up, we'll be gone. It's a funny. It struck me as odd at the time, and there's a great dialogue there where Frodo really is exasperated, I think, by Gildor, and Gildor's reluctance to just tell him what's wrong. I like it a lot, actually.
I really like Gildor, and I think, I do understand the fact that he tells advice is dangerous, and on the other hand, weirdly, that's something I have heard recently in Quebec. Advice is very dangerous to give, so you gotta make your own mistakes. I got told that in class, and it was like that was a little.
Well, so here's like one of the first little bits where Gildor is trying to tell without telling Frodo about the dangers he faces. So, he mentions the riders or the enemy, and then Frodo's like, "Oh, you mean the riders?" And so, you mean the riders? I fear that they were servants of the enemy. What are the Black Riders? Has Gandalf told you nothing? Nothing about such creatures? Then I think it is not for me to say more, lest terror should keep you from your journey. For it seems to me that you have set out only just in time. If indeed you are in time, you must now make haste, and neither stay nor turn back, for the Shire is no longer any protection to you. And so he says this stuff, he's like, I'm not going to say any more, but oh boy. And then the response from Frodo's great. He's like, I cannot imagine what information could be more terrifying than your hints and warnings, which is so true. He's like, this terror is, oh my God, you are lucky to be alive. Not going to talk about it. Just so you know, you'd be scared if I told you. Not going to tell you. Like, you're scaring me now.
Yeah, he's basically telling Frodo, run for your life.
Yeah. But it's just so great that it's like, because it would scare you, I'll just say it would terrify you to death, basically, so I won't tell you. Like, okay. Thanks for the help. I mean, that's just like what my imagination can do in that moment is way worse than you saying, oh, yeah, they're servants of Sauron. But, yeah.
But,
it's fun. Anyway, I like that moment.
Elrond tends to give very concrete advice. Perhaps it's his mannish streak. I think it is that, but let's also not forget that Galadriel gives some pretty concrete commentary and whatnot as well. At least I tend to think of that. Same with, no, actually, I don't think Glorfindel gives too much advice.
Nah, yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, he's helpful, obviously, but
Glorfindel's immensely helpful.
As the conversation continues, we get a little bit more of Frodo's, I would say, irritation almost with Gildor. So Gildor says, we just talked about a little bit about this. Gildor was silent for a moment. I do not like this news, he said at last. The news that Gandalf hasn't shown up. That Gandalf should be late does not bode well. But it is said, do not meddle in the affairs of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger. The choice is yours, to go or wait. And then the response is great from Frodo. I love this. It says, it is also said, answered Frodo, go not to the elves for counsel, for they will say both no and yes. It's just such a smackdown almost of Gildor, oh, thanks, appreciate. Oh, go or wait? Really? I was wondering which of those I should try. Thanks so much for helping me on making my decision. So anyway, I do feel like Frodo's like, just tell me and I'll do it. I just need someone in authority to tell me what to do here. And Gildor's like, I'm not letting you off the hook. Nope, not doing it.
What's important about that is that what Gildor is telling him is that you can't wait for someone of authority to give you direction. Only you can give yourself direction. So that this is a very interesting exchange where he's basically telling Frodo, it's on yourself, it's on your own head that responsibility should fall for which way to go. Don't turn to me to make the decision for you. This is on you to choose. And Gildor, when it comes to information, he's not like he's a free-flowing fountain. Like, he does inform him a bit about the
He does.
Black Riders, and he does tell him that Bilbo is an Imladris, and
he remembers Frodo. That was an interesting point too. It's like, oh yeah, I used to. You were with Bilbo, and I remember meeting you. Anyway, so that's kind of cool too that he actually has a memory of Frodo.
And he also names Frodo Elf Friend.
Yeah,
which is a pretty big deal because as an elf friend, this basically means Frodo can probably go to the elves for help, which is no small thing because many are the heroes and failed heroes who need to go to the elves for help and rescue and whatnot. And the elves are always quick and prompt to help any elf friend, from Turin to Rambar to Aragorn to Húrin to Tuor to the Númenóreans of the Second Age. So naming Frodo as such is no small deal.
Yeah, and that obviously carries through to the end of the trilogy, right? I mean, that's Frodo's status as one who is a friend of and gets help from the elves, and eventually goes west. I mean, gets that honor of heading west is definitely puts him in that category. I just actually did a video where I was just, it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but basically I just traced out is it possible there's an elf in the Took family line, like it mentions anyway, and in that I found all the various quotes where it compares elven characteristics, gives Frodo elven characteristics, and there are quite a few of those throughout the book. So yeah, so elf friend, there he's it's a character trait.
You know what helps having a ring from an important elf? Beren wasn't straight out killed in Doriath and got into Nargothrond. That's a good point.
Right, exactly. Great point. He shows up without it. Goodbye. That was the end of that guy.
Yeah.
So we've got another quote there where then I like this one a little bit too, because Gildor kind of spells out like you are in real trouble. So he says, Frodo asks him, Frodo's like, okay, we've been talking a while, and you told me I don't want to talk about the Black Riders, but I'm giving you another chance to tell me what the Black Riders are. So he's like, I wish you would tell me plainly what the Black Riders are. If I take your advice, I may not see Gandalf for a long while, and I ought to know what is the danger that pursues me. It's a completely logical concern to have. Is it not enough to know that they are servants of the enemy? Answered Gildor. Flee them. Speak no words to them. They are deadly. Ask no more of me. But my heart forebodes that ere all is ended, you, Frodo, son of Drogo, will know more of these fell things than Gildor and Glorian. May Elbereth protect you. There's like, well, where shall I find courage? That's what I chiefly need. Courage is found in unlikely places. Be of good hope. Sleep now. But it's just funny that, again, it's just in the moment where he's like, oh man, these things are deadly. They're terrible. But I have a feeling you're going to run into them big time. Anyway, get some sleep. I'd be like, what? I'd spend the night just be like, oh God. But, to his credit, Frodo manages to catch some shut-eye.
But I find the line, but where shall I find courage? that is what I chiefly need. A little funny because, well, we're in the last bit of Hour of the Dragon, which is Robert E. Howard's Lord of the Rings with Conan the Barbarian, and it's funny because the Sumerians believe that Crom, their god, whom is cold and uncaring, only does one act of caring at the start of every person's life. He breathes courage into them, and it's for them to find it within them when the time comes. And it just causes Conan to scorn anyone who asks him, but where shall I find courage? Because he tends to think, well, what are you, weak? Crom gave you courage enough to, survive. So find it and, pull it out with both hands and go.
Yeah, courage is found in unlikely.
That's what it reminded me of. Yeah, but although in that story, and the thought just occurred to me that fans are always commenting on how cruel Crom is and how he doesn't come to the rescue like other gods in fiction tend to. So that Crom out to take more responsibility and help his followers. But in hindsight, given how much courage he breathes into his Sumerians, maybe just even a small amount of courage is more than gift enough, considering that it's a small amount of courage that Conan got, along with a lot of his crew members and friends, so that he finds his way to basically completing a quest rather like Frodo's. So I'm just thinking maybe even a little courage is more than nothing. And
I think what's so great about this conversation too, other than little world building, we get to meet this Gildor and Glorian, is I got out of it that Frodo pushes back, right? He's not just like, he doesn't take everything at face value and just say, okay, whatever you say. Like he takes a little agency in this moment, and he's willing to, I want to say argue, but kind of argue,
push back
politely with this ageless elven noble. And I think that says something about his character as well.
What's with the dog? Sorry, dog's rolled over onto his back.
You get him, Jet. He's looking for pets. Tummy rubs.
Yeah.
I know that reading this part, I couldn't help but think of the Book of Three from Prydain, how Taran, he first meets Gideon, his mentor, in essentially the very same way, being chased by the Cauldron-born and the Horn King.
Well, the thing is, we got to bear in mind is that Lloyd Alexander obviously read Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
And there was obviously inspiration drawn from this scene. And this...
I couldn't help but think, what would have happened if Taran came across Gildor instead of Gwydion?
Well, he would have gotten no concrete advice, for one thing. But and he would have probably been mocked far more, considering, Gwydion is nowhere near as wry and funny as Gildor. Gildor is hilarious.
Indeed.
But Gildor does end up, like it's pointed out, he does do a lot. He just does things more in the background. What I wonder, though, given everything, like I'm now going to posit a question as a writer, and this is, why was Gildor not used as one of the Nine Walkers?
Well, it's the same thing with Glorfindel, right? I think that's probably the reason. They talk about Glorfindel when we get to the Council of Elrond, and I think the reason that there's kind of like an in-universe reason and an out-of-universe reason. The in-universe, I think the reason is that they would draw way too much attention.
Yeah, he's too powerful. He'll draw too much attention.
In fact, there's a glow that comes off of them, and you're like, there, the beacon, there it is. And so I think that was the idea, was that it's too much attention. That's what they'll expect. in a non-out of universe reason, I feel like it's just the idea of like we want. This is a human story, or in case a Hobbit story, but this isn't about immortal elven heroes saving the day. That's not what this book
For that,
is about.
read the Silmarillion.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's all about your elves. This is not that story, and so that's the out of universe reason. But in universe, I think the idea is like they'd be too noticeable. This would attract way too much attention. You want to be subtle. No one would suspect Frodo Baggins running off to Mount Doom. That's what we're gonna do.
Does beg the question. But Gildor is one character who we're gonna later see at the Council of Elrond. Him and Glorfindel, obviously. Glorfindel's just he should never have been cut from the Jackson movie. I love Glorfindel.
You're preaching to the choir on that one. I'm all for Glorfindel. I can see why he did it, just because his part disappears after the first book. But he's an amazing character, and if you looked at the background of that guy, it's such a fascinating character. But they wouldn't have time to look into the background to the extent it would be needed. But
but I'd still rather see him show up to the rescue than Arwen.
Sure, no, I get it. I get it, and he is incredibly powerful, and even in the little bit we get of him in the books, like the Nazgul are basically just terrified of him. I mean, they just run away. They'll find him out, like they'll outnumber him. He'll show up and they just turn around and run. Oh, we're out of here. So
even with the Witch King at their head, they're not going to screw around.
Witch King would certainly remember him from days gone by. Anyway. You find Glorfindel overrated? Oh, all right, Mark. That's fighting words.
Underrated. He's underrated. Then fighting words.
Don't get me started on that Arwen arc.
Thank you,
buddy. Okay, so Mark, you don't have to explain it, but if it's easy to explain in a couple of lines, give me your quick reasoning why Glorfindel is overrated. I would suggest if you take the Glorfindel that fell in the fall of Gondolin, that one who is then reincarnated, resurrected, came to Middle Earth, and then sat on the council. That guy is tough to overrate. That guy. Only in one scenario I would accept Glorfindel at the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. Someone would say to him, "Do your thing." That's right. Just you know what to do. All right, you guys take. I'll catch up with you later. Okay. Slice dice.
Poor Glorfindel.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So I feel like Gildor though falls into that, as I say, that elite company of Glorfindel and those folks that have.
Well, you can't really have them out on the quest because they attract too much attention, as you
perhaps seen the light of the trees before they were killed off. Anyway.
Yeah. Although Glorfindel in particular, plot-wise, would make no sense going on the quest because he's just too darn.
He's OP.
He's way too OP, and everybody's basically just gonna point and go, "Oh, there they are, get them." And Gondolin, Ecthelion was the superior fighter in terms re-embodiment.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
Well, I'll say that I do think Ecthelion probably is the superior fighter, but where I think Glorfindel is all the greater is the sacrifice he makes against the one Balrog in the Fall of Gondolin, and that this kind of elevates Glorfindel in a way.
I like Homebody says the movie Arwen has agency. The book Arwen falls apart when Aragorn dies. Movie Arwen wouldn't have cracked. See my 2-minute Arwen Fetch Fest vid. Nice. Okay. Yep. No, you're right. She does have agency, and it's a definite intentional, plot device from Peter Jackson to like put her
Well,
more face forward into the story.
on the other hand, I find I'm actually gonna. I don't really like how well her interaction with Aragorn there, because I think that mine on the job, buddy. And on the other hand, I find that her having so much agency comes at the cost of Aragorn having agency. He spends too much time hee-hawing about whether or not he should do anything, rather than butching up and going out and doing his duty. But I'm going to be honest. I probably would be more forgiving of the portrayal of Arwen if Aragorn in the movie was a bit more butch. And by that I mean, like, if he was portrayed more like he is in the book, the almost melancholic, charismatic.
I don't know. I feel like Vigo really pulls off that melancholy.
Well, it's just
the person who sees his duty, is fulfilling it, is the reluctant king. I don't know. I feel like he kind of nailed that. But I hear you. Everyone to their interpretation.
The thing I mean is, in the book, he's already accepted that he will be king. He must be king, and he wishes to become king in order to marry Arwen. He wishes to fulfill his duty. Whereas in the movie, he has no wish to fulfill his duty to become king. So that I find that the two are, in a way, opposite.
I will say, though, the one particular, I love the Fellowship of the Ring film, but there's a couple of quibbles I got with it. One of them is I would like to see Glorfindel, but it's the change, and it seems like it's not that big a deal, but to me, it's kind of a big deal. At the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, the film, our Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli see Frodo and Sam crossing the river and getting out on the other side of the shore. And they make the choice not to follow them. They make the choice to instead go after Mary, like, let's hunt some orc. And they're, ah. And you're like, that comes on the heels of, flash back a little bit where Aragorn says, if by my life or death I can aid you, I promise you, I will do whatever it takes to aid you in your quest. And that's not, in the book, Frodo successfully sneaks away. And so in the middle of all the combat, he disappears and Aragorn has no choice. He's like, I don't know where they are. Crap. Let's just pick the ones we know where they are. Okay, fine. Let's go this way. Whereas to let him decide to basically break his vow, in my opinion, and say, nope. All right, fine. We're going to go after Merry and Pippin instead. I feel like I wouldn't have made that choice. I'm just saying. I wouldn't have had him do that. That's just me.
What I'm going to disagree with Homebuddy on is that I would argue that book Aragorn was torn, and he does speak at length when the time comes about what to do. He does speak of being torn about which way to go after Frodo and Sam have disappeared. And the thing is, he ends up making the right choice. He knows he has to continue on to Gondor and whatnot, or not Gondor, but he has to carry on with the quest in a different direction from Frodo, to an extent. And on the other hand, the theme that Arwen was the carrot.
Right, I hear what you're saying, Homebody.
I like Arwen being the carrot far more than her being some female warrior woman. And the only reason I like that, weirdly, is I think that there's different forms of female agency. Like Galadriel, you don't see her as a warrior in the film or in the Lord of the Rings book, but she certainly has agency. And Arwen as an archetype, I think of her more in terms of this book as being the Queen of Love in a way. She is the ideal that Aragorn is striving towards. And this is harkening back to old medieval legends where, for example, King Arthur or something would have to earn the favor of his lady love and would have to go out and on a grand quest to prove
And I think
himself.
that's what Homebody's saying by the carrot. It's like, oh, you're the reward at the end of doing this stuff. And I get that point. I would say that while I wasn't thrilled with the way that Jackson pulled it off, I could see Jackson's thinking in that if he had just stuck to specifically what the book did with Arwen, it would basically be more or less the Return of the King shows up, the book. Hey, we won. And then Aragorn gets married. And you don't really get to know who this person is he's marrying. And it's kind of almost like, okay. So I think in his mind, he's like, let's make this a person so that when they get married, it makes more sense of like, oh, I care about this person he's marrying. I think that's kind of where he was.
On the other hand, Arwen does have her fate tied to Middle Earth, which is really dumb, I find.
Yeah. That was
a bigger damsel. Best not put any stress as a queen on her because clearly rulership's going to be too much for her, I find. So, that's where I'm just like, oh, come on, Jackson. If you're trying to aim for that, do it right. Don't it's one or the other. You can't have it both ways. But on the other hand, I'm a medievalist. I like my medieval literature. I like my folklore. I like everything old. If I had a time travel device, I'd probably go back to the 19th century just because I'd rather live through that time period. But that's just me.
I'm living in the age of cell phones, baby. Let's do it. I'm all for it. Headphones, plumbing. No, they had plumbing. Whatever, you know what I mean.
But okay, fair enough. The plumbing thing I do prefer today over back then. But that said, like I said, I kind of like my stories very old and classic and traditional. But if you prefer it otherwise, Homebody.
Right, penicillin, baby. There we go.
I also saw that as Elrond being a foster father want the best for both of them. Now,
right, and then it did give Elrond a more of a place in the story as well. Good point. That anyway.
Well, I prefer Elrond in the book, but I just find in the book I just love Elrond. Sorry, I'm an Elrond fanboy for the book, but for the movie, I'm not the biggest fan because he just behaved so grouchily. Like he's always mad.
He's grouch. He's a grouch.
Yeah.
He's more grouchy than Gildor. Gildor kind of rolls with the punches with Frodo's, frustration. He'll be like, oh, okay, good point. When he basically calls him out for saying, you never give me actual advice. So I feel like Gildor is more, he's not so world weary that he's jaded. I feel like Gildor's got a little bit of social skill still left in him.
But all I'll say, I want penicillin, 1960s.
Yeah, she's just Homebody's basically saying like, yeah, the 19th century had some downsides.
Yeah. But
yeah, so Homebody's saying I don't prefer the Xena treatment of Arwen. That didn't work. What he did fits. I just find it annoying. It's a gal thing, dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. This is something which, as a writer, I like to write both the kind of give the Xena treatment to some of my female characters, and I also like to have the more classic female archetypes because, you have to pay homage to classical divine femininity because, not enough people pay homage to the greatness of female archetypes. That's my view, but I'm also a guy, so there's a lot of things that go over my head when it comes to women, obviously. But yeah, I think Arwen should have had more scenes, but I'm not sure. This is a case where I don't know what should have been done. I don't have any advice. It's just I don't like what Jackson did, but I do understand his plight or his scenario. He had to do something. I just don't have all the answers. I'm not going to be one of those internet guys who says I have all the answers. No, I clearly don't.
No, but we will pick up with the Arwen Aragorn plot once we meet up with Aragorn, which will be in a few chapters to come.
Yeah. Although Aragorn is a character I'm excited to see, but he's so many chapters away.
Well, so many. He's not so many chapters away. He's coming. He's coming. We've got next time we're going to be actually back on the Dork Lords channel, and we're going to be talking about chapter 4, a shortcut to mushrooms, where we're going to
I love this chapter.
That's it's Thanksgiving, it's the holiday season. We'll find the time, but we'll find the time to get chapter 4 going. But then once we hit that, now we're off. Now we're gonna hit we're gonna hit Tom Bombadil, the Old Forest. We hit the Barrow Downs. Barrow Downs is the chapter that I would have loved to have seen Jackson pull off, especially because Jackson came from like a horror background. I think he could have really done some good work with the Barrow Downs. But anyway, he had a time crunch. Only so much you could tell. But I feel like Barrow Downs would have been really cinematic.
Mark makes a good point here. We saved you from a Nazgul. You can get a good night's sleep because we're looking after you, and we will tell our allies about you. What more do you want?
Well, there's that, but then also, and we're going to leave you. When you wake up, we won't be here. He was like, okay. And they weren't. He basically left them.
Dry.
He has foresight, I would say, probably. It all worked out. So Gildor is let off the hook. If he'd have left them and then they'd have been set upon by Dark Riders, they'd be like, oh, Gildor. But they weren't. So the ends justify the means. Well done, Gildor.
The next chapter sees another character give advice and warn Frodo because, Nazgul are out and about. And I can't wait for Conspiracy Unmasked. I love
and we should point out that the first encounter that they have on the road with Black Rider is actually depicted very well in both the animated, the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings, and I think it was kind of duplicated, copied. That scene was copied, but very well by Peter Jackson. Again, very cinematic. They're hiding under the roots of the trees. Here comes the Dark Rider. He's doing the little sniffling thing.
I think Jackson did that scene better.
Yeah, it's very effective, very evocative.
I may not be a fan of Jackson, but that's a scene that he clearly did better. He was very
interestingly though, if I remember right, I think in Jackson's version, Sam is the one that keeps Frodo from putting the ring on. Whereas in the book, Frodo manages to resist temptation on his own. He doesn't need Sam to stop it. Obviously Jackson was kind of giving Sam a little more agency in that moment.
The trouble is Ralph Bakshi didn't really do a good job portraying Sam.
No. But actually, that animated movie was a mess, and the fact that it ends after Helm's Deep is a big mess. It's a mess, but there are some things in that are awesome, and I would say that particular scene is pretty well done. But you're right, his depiction of Sam is just terrible. Elves, Mr. Frodo, elves. Like, okay, all right.
Sounds like a supervillain.
And the fact that no one wears pants. I don't know if you noticed if you watch Aragorn and Boromir, they're running around and they have armor up top. They're not wearing pants. You're like, why are you wearing pants? Anyway, that's just it's easier to draw bare legs. I don't know. It was we'll save the paint. Oh, it was weird.
Actually, it's kind of easier to draw pants.
I would think it would be easier to draw pants, but I don't know. Anyway, it was just a weird thing of like, why would you think that these guys who are going around and armored and would not wear something below the waist? But he didn't. Anyway,
and I'm coming at it from an animator's perspective. It's far easier to animate and draw anthropomorphic animals, but overall you're going to want to draw pants on a human being, especially if you're animating him, and it'd be tightly cinched, tightly bound pants that you'd want to
It's-
animate. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare. But
And so,
going
also, just in reference to the conversation we were just having about Jackson leaving Glorfindel out, Bakshi also left Glorfindel out, but instead of Arwen, he put in Legolas. He thought, okay, here's our chance to meet Legolas, so let's do that instead. So Legolas is the one that saves them at the ford. So each director had his own version of like, how do I introduce these characters and snip away some others? Gildor did not enter either story, unfortunately.
which is a pretty big sin. Gildor is a great character.
Just
That's right.
meeting him for the first time, I like him. It's a sin. It's a mortal sin, condemnable to
right.
the 7
Hells of the Divine Comedy.
not
in
to
Paradise
include
Lost.
him.
Yeah,
I'll-
I think the role that these elves, semi-divine elves, play here is this is a meeting with the divine in a way. This is kind of, and that's why I think it might be important. It might sound weird, but if ever there's a Lord of the Rings adaptation again, I would hope that it'd be done more as a TV serial, so that each chapter could almost be an episode or something. And
Yeah, I agree. A movie is just too short a time to tell the story, I think, properly, if you want to really go to it.
Although
Mark's got an idea. I'll let you spell that out. I was just going to add on one little bit about Gildor, which is at the end, we're flash forwarding to Return of the King, when he sails away to the west, he inevitably does sail away to the west. That boat that he's on, they take the Elistirian stone with them. So that stone is returning to the west, meaning that basically he equals the pilgrimages. When he's got, as long as he's around, the pilgrimages happen. When he leaves, he takes a stone. Essentially, I don't know if he takes a stone, but the stone is on the ship with him, and so that effectively ends the pilgrimages because there's no more stone to view through. So that's kind of interesting. All right, so Mark says, Frodo and Sam should have met Círdan on his way to Elrond. That way, could have had Círdan 2 times here and at the council. Agreed. Yeah. Círdan would be he's another amazingly complex, deeply rich history character that just gets short shrift big time in Lord of the Rings. You just didn't have time for him. But yeah, if you could have found a way, he gets name dropped a few times, importantly so. Why not have him step up? You're right there. He's right near the Shire. Find a way to bring him in. I agree. Well done, Mark. Well played. Good sir.
I would also want a director who maybe as showrunner or something, like Robert Rodriguez, who I'm not saying I want like I just mean
Spy Kids, Lord of the Rings. Got it.
No, I just meant when he took his From Dusk Till Dawn series and adapted it into the first series of the TV series. It's the only season I really cared about. What I liked was that he took like just a few minutes of the movie, turned that into an episode, for example. He knew to dig deep into each moment of his movie to stretch it out and turn it almost into a chapter novel. Like the chapters to a novel or the episodes of a TV series, knowing how to stretch each part without having it feel as though it's being drawn like thinly. And this is a special talent. And I think that on the one hand, someone like that who knows what needs to be stretched out, what doesn't need to be, and has good instincts about this sort of thing, might be a good choice for a director or a showrunner for such a series. Although that said, I don't think, given his taste, like I do like him, but like I don't think his tastes run towards Lord of the Rings. He's much more a Conan type of person or Solomon Kane. But
great point, Homebody. By the way, talking about Círdan, I think you're right. I think he is the oldest elf in Middle Earth. Círdan. I assume that's what you're talking about. Yeah, right. He's got the lineage. He's up here in terms of he's the elder statesman of the elves.
Yeah, very much so. he makes even Gandalf look young.
So anyway, but yeah, that's it would be right if you're gonna pick a group of characters that you would want to see more of in Lord of the Rings. Círdan's got to be near the top of that list,
Yeah, but
for sure.
I think we've exhausted this topic because we've moved away from the actual chapter. So next time it's going to be on Dork Lords, and so people should.
Yeah. Come on over to Dork Lords. We'll do chapter 4. Shortcut to mushrooms. My wife, not a fan of mushrooms, doesn't like the texture, but that aside, we'll just.
So I'm going to be starving next chapter. I love mushrooms.
They're probably, they're you get a heaping helping of them in a lot of Thanksgiving dishes. So there you go. It'll be seasonal. Our shortcut to mushrooms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned Celeborn here. They're talking about Celeborn's. Yeah. No, Celeborn. There's a version, an older non-canonical version of Celeborn that lived in the West, but basically he was born. He never went west. So Círdan would predate Celeborn. Yeah, agreed.
So do feel free to smash that like and that subscribe button, folks, as it is sure to help, and smash it as though you were, we'll say, Sauron trying to take down Gil-galad. And don't just do it over here. Do it over at Dork Lords.
Oh yes, thank you very much, sir. I'm working on some kind of a niche video that certain Gelmir from the First Age. Anyway, it's almost too niche for me, but I figured out a fun way to frame it story wise that I think is really, really cool. So that's what we're going with, baby. Coming up soon.
I'm hoping to continue our Silmarillion book club and finally make it to Beren and Luthien to do a full book club of Beren and Luthien soon. I'm really excited and wanting to read that, as I love the story of Beren and Luthien. Then again, I love all the tales of the Silmarillion.
Yeah. No,
they're special.
Classic. Yep.
Yeah. Do take care, everyone, and we'll